Hello and welcome to this episode of Rival Stories where we're working on the Kawasaki GPZ900R. Now if you've watched the other episodes, you've seen me pull this engine apart and split the engine cases. I want to look at the starter clutch. It's a common problem, so I thought whilst I'm here it'd be very prudent for me to take it out and see what condition it's in. To do that, I need to remove the gearbox and a few other bits and bobs to give me access to the starter clutch. Number one. Once you've got the gearbox out, you can clearly see the starter clutch, which is this one here, and the cog that the starter motor engages to, which is this one here. The starter motor turns the engine over, and then the engine kicks in. The starter motor stops, but the engine turns. The reason you have a starter clutch is because when the engine takes over, you don't want it spinning the starter motor up at 1,000,000 miles an hour and breaking it. On this side, we've just taken off that drum, which means we can now pull this shaft out and release the starter clutch. There's the shaft. And get the starter clutch out. So one starter clutch removed from a GPZ900R. So here's your starter clutch, and we need to dismantle it. So the first thing you need to do is remove this clip. After that, you have a little washer, and you have the cog which the starter motor drives. Take the needle bearing out. Now one of the problems that these have is that the springs lose their springiness and they actually shrink in length, meaning that the rollers aren't pushed against the collar of the starter wheel, and of course then it won't grip. And the reason these are on springs is as the roller goes further back and into its groove, it retreats away from the collar of the starter cog, which means it will slip. So one way it will grip, the other way it will slip. And it grips because basically physics means that if it's turning one way, these will self-tighten. Put an Allen key in there, put a spanner over the collar, it should mean. There we go. Prepare for these to be tight. So now it's just a case of lifting this off nice and gently. Might find wheels pop out. There we have everything. So we've got spring caps. 3 off. 1 spring. 2 spring. 3 spring. And of course, 1, 2, 3 rollers. So what we have here are the pinch rollers, the springs and the spring caps from the old starter clutch. Over here is a rebuild kit. The springs out of the older starter clutch are about between 5 and 8 millimeters shorter than the springs from the new rebuild kit. So we're going to be putting all the new rebuild kit components back in the starter clutch. So get your spring and the cap, put it together, slide that in the hole there. Try and do this with your fingers. If not, you can do it with a pair of thin nose pliers. Put your roller in and then let the spring out. Pinch roller. And there you have all of your rollers in your starter clutch. This is the case that we unscrewed. Put that in, but turn it over nice and gently. The next bit is putting these 3 bolts back in to the housing. Now what you don't want is these rollers pinging back towards the center. So I always use a little bit of tube and I wrap it around like so, because then when we're working, these can't ping into the middle. Put over your needle bearing, turning your starter cog anti-clockwise. In this case, I put in the washer on. So there you have it, the starter clutch completely disassembled, reconditioned and put back in the engine. The reassembly process is the exact opposite of the disassembly process. It's a case of putting the shaft back through the starter clutch, the drum on the opposite end, which is for the alternator push drive, and then putting the starter cog in, the spindle, and of course tightening all your nuts up to torque. I'm not going to put the gearbox back in yet because I need to clean the mating surfaces of these engine cases, so when they come together they're nice and clean and they create a good seal. But that's for another day. Thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.